want to welcome Dr. Victoria Marron. Welcome to Built for Agility and being here to share your story, your experience when it comes to secondary trauma, post-traumatic stress, and your actual experience of how you're living after everything. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just incredibly honored. Who would have thought that we'd be here talking about especially this topic? I guess even talking about this subject, it came about when I was sharing an experience. And so that's what I'd like to share with you today.
Absolutely.
And just to put it into context, I'll go a little bit further back in time. But in particular, as a child, with my first interactions with law enforcement, they were a little, on one hand, in school, obviously like DARE, right? And I'm a 90s kid, so it was like the dog and, doing the whole show. And I was at Lamar Elementary here in Baytown. And there was like that fun part. But then when I went home, it just felt so different because the interaction was very different.
Big disconnect.
It was a big disconnect because I was like, oh, you were like cool and fun and said you're here to help and say no to drugs, in school. But in my neighborhoods, so in elementary, all throughout my elementary years, I grew up all over Baytown, from Northwood to East James to Oak Addition to Nazaro to just everywhere, all around the Lamar School, Honeycutt, just anywhere and everywhere. And but I grew up in a very physically violent home. My grandmother, who raised me, was with a very abusive man. And so having law enforcement come to our door pretty frequently was very common. And as a child, thinking you're supposed to protect me, us, her, the home. Why do you keep letting him stay here? To the point where in one particular incident that I recall so vividly was a night that I was basically getting in trouble because I didn't wash my hair. And at this point, I'm already traumatized because this man towers over me. He's like over 6 foot tall. I'm just in third grade, and my
little
uncle,
kid.
Yeah, just little a little kid. And my grandmother was working nights at the hospital. She was a nurse's aide, and my uncle, aunt, and her 2 kids lived with us. She and the kids were in the bathroom. They, she went to give them a bath after I got out, and I'm in the kitchen, and he's towering over me, yelling at me, and my uncle steps in, and they get into a whole brawl from the kitchen to the living room. And it's just a 2-bedroom apartment in East James. So it's not that big. They're all over the place fighting, to the point where he was sitting and eating, there was a can opener. I stepped out and they're fighting, and he cuts my uncle's neck open with a can opener. So there's blood. I'm on the phone with 911. I'm hiding behind, the kitchen sink table area, and police come. But by then, my grandmother's already come home. They're sitting at 2 ends of the couch like 2 little boys in trouble. And they basically just tell the officers, we're fine. Everything's fine. But the looks on their faces, so disgusted and frustrated, which now as an adult, I understand. But to me as a child, it made it feel as if I or we did something wrong.
There was no comfort for you. You made the call. Oh. You're terrified. They come in as if I'm bothered, wasting my time.
Yeah. And it was like, and so one of the officers says, and I couldn't remember it quote, but they were telling my grandmother, if there's nothing that you want us to do, you should just stop calling us. Because I remember as a child feeling like, I thought I did the right thing. I thought calling y'all was what I was supposed to do. And so anyways, that was kind of those experiences. And growing up in the 90s, we all know, there was a lot of just crime happening, in the community.
Because I want to go back to that, because that experience right there is truly embedded in now. Growing up in 3rd grade on, they come to the school, they tell you, we're here to help. I remember the dog or the bear clearly coming, telling you, we're here for you to protect you, call us if you need any help. You do what you were taught, Even though your environment was totally different, you're like, okay, I'm going to get protected from my environment. I'm doing the right thing. And they walk in knowing a child call. They know, they have to know from dispatch, a child called saying they need assistance. And for them to come in and say to you, if you don't need any help, just don't call. Not even acknowledging, do you need some help? What's going on? That's hurtful.
I'm like in the background and I can see them out the door. Like I said, it's not a big apartment.
Right,
like,
right.
There's a clear path through the living room into the kitchen, and I see them talking to my grandmother. And, you know, and in that same apartment, there was a morning I was getting ready to, it was in the summertime. I feel like he was taking me to summer camp at the YMCA or something. And I was getting ready. I'm in their bedroom in front of the mirror and the dresser. And he comes and sets down a bowl of Fruity Pebbles and says something kind of snarky and then walks back out. And then I start to feel, for the first time in my life, this is the first time that it happened, but this kind of rush of hotness up my neck and over my head. And I just blacked out. The next thing I recall, he's pulling me out from underneath their bed with my head facing in and him pulling my arm out because it cut the back of my ear at some point. My grandmother comes from work. Like, what happened? I'm looking at the dresser. Everything over the dresser is like if I had a seizure. There were things thrown all over the dresser. And I remember feeling so freaked out, like, what just happened to me? I don't know what. So, you know, we were raised in a home that what happens at home stays at home. Sometimes I had insurance, sometimes I didn't. So I was never taken to the doctor. So for literally 40 years now, I never knew why that happened, but then it kept happening at different times in my life.
That anxiety, that build up, that heat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so could never explain it. I would have, you know, all the medical stuff done. Maybe I'm anemic, maybe your sugar's low, but several times throughout my life, I had these just blackout kind of, you know, situations that happen, and recently had learned through trauma-based therapy about conversion disorder and how when children experience high trauma as children, the way our brains wire at that young of an age. And so, you know, to this day, I'm in therapy and really learning more about these experiences in life and what it does to you, what it does to the wiring of your brain, not just the way you just interpret something or someone or a particular situation. And it's just been a life healing type process. So that just gives some historical context.
But it shows your layers, though, because that's one layer of your trauma of your environment. And now your other layer that compounded that was interactions with law enforcement.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way to say it, because what ended up happening later, my grandmother passes away. And so then I'm an adult. I've been married, 2 kids, you know, graduated college, got a house. And so this was back 2011. And I get a call from my uncle. The same aunt and uncle were living with her in Craigmont, and get the call at like 4:00 in the morning. Something's wrong. You know, Mama's gone. Mama's gone. That's all that they kept saying. Mama's gone. And I'm like, what? Y'all are crazy. There's something else, you know? So my biological mom and her husband stepped out, and we go. And as soon as I walk in the door, police officer standing at the entertainment center with her arm just kind of cocked up, leaning on it. My uncle sitting in a recliner looking like a zombie. My aunt sitting on the couch just looking like shocked. And I look at this police officer and I'm like, and my mom takes the lead, you know, takes the charge. It's like, what's going on, Joey? You know, like, what happened? And I look at the police officer, and she just looks, I never forget the tribal type tattoos on the arm that came all the way down, and just this stoic face of, yeah, well, I mean, she's dead. Ambulance has already left, and she's down the hall if you'd like to see her. And in my mind, I just thought, you just said dead, and I could see her at the same sentence. So
what?
And I don't know anything else that was said. I just went down the hall. I go down the hall. I open her bedroom door and she's literally laying on her floor, her gown up over her hip, her eyes still open, and she's deceased. And I lost it. I screamed, cried, yelled. I don't know what I was saying. My stepdad pulled me down the hallway to the point that I started vomiting. I had to go outside, and just horrible. And
Right.
yeah. I remember thinking, and so I shared this. I was part of the first community engagement group that Mayor Capetillo asked a great friend of mine, Gina, to pull some minority leaders together to help with the community relations between the police department and the community after Pamela Turner's murder. And I shared this at one of our town halls where we had at the church down there on Main Street, because I kept feeling like the police officer who was talking just was not being empathetic and wasn't hearing the other people who were speaking. And it's like, I understand. And I said that day, and I'll say it again. I understand being a police officer is an incredibly hard job. I don't want to do it. The closest I ever had to being it was a juvenile gang probation officer for Harris County. And I understand it's a hard job. I worked alongside them. I took gang members into custody without a gun in my car to take them to juvenile detention. I understand how hard it is.
Right.
But it is just not okay to not have empathy. I understand you may see multiple dead bodies. I understand you may be involved. I understand there's a degree of desensitization that comes with the job, but get therapy, get help, seek support systems, because then for you to respond so callously, just so cold, just so with other human beings, that stays with them for life.
I don't think they understand. And like you said, it's a hard job. They're hardened. They're used to it. But every interaction, we're not used to it.
Yeah.
We're not used to this.
We're civilians. We are not.
We're civilians. For a moment, I know you have to stay on guard, but for a second, recognize I'm not used to this. So if you call me for a death or a murder or something I have to witness or view, you are shocking my system.
Yeah.
I cannot hold it together. That's another layer of there needs to be someone else with them that is trained in that part, because do your job, but who can I talk to who's going to recognize I need to process this, what's going on?
Yeah. And, after that situation, my life just really fell apart. But there were times that I could be driving down the highway and I would have those flashes, those visions, and I would hear that officer say, she's down the hall. You can go see her if you'd like. She's down the hall. You can go see her if you'd like. To the point that when I started therapy, they're like, you clearly have PTSD. Nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night, the sweats, all of it. It was happening for years. And, I think, now I feel like I've come a really long way through the type of therapy I'm going through now. But if I could have gone through that type many, many years ago, it could have really, I think, minimized a lot of the other just crap that I went through, and then my family, my kids, my marriage, these things that were really impacted by, and was it this police officer's fault that the blah, blah, blah that's happened in Victoria? No, but it sure didn't help. It sure didn't help. And if we could have had somebody there with that officer to say, there's been a death here. It's not a good idea to go to the room right now. And granted, some people are going to react differently. They're going to still be in denial, but to take some steps to prepare you to process. I mean, God forbid, at least, and an ambulance comes and just leaves her in that state too. That was another thing that I just thought, what? Why would you not do? I mean, in the movies, they cover up bodies. They put a blanket, over their head. You
I
just
experienced it. I'm telling
left
you.
her.
When my mom passed away, she was home alone. So the police had to come and do an investigation and photograph every part of the house, even though they're like, and luckily, I'm in Baytown as well. Luckily, they were like, I'm sorry, but this is what we have to do. Ambulance comes, pronounced my mom has passed, and she's in the bathroom, just laying there in between the shower and the vanity. And I'm freaking out. I'm thinking, okay, so from that moment on, I can't be near her, they say. The police have to come because she was home alone, take a photo of everything, make sure there wasn't any forced entry. It was so like impersonal, not anyone really saying protocol, I have to do that. And from the moment they finished, they stood between me and the back of the house. I could not go past it. And Harris County, as you know, has one coroner, and it took hours to get here. So they're standing between myself and my mom. I can't go cover her up. I can't put a blanket over. You can't touch her. So you mean to tell me she's laying there, gone? There's no forced entry. I'm telling you, I mean, natural causes. She's just laying there uncovered, and I can't cover her up? Just to some kind of comfort? No. He would not, and he just stand there. No. Hours.
Yeah.
From 6 p.m. until 12:15 a.m. the next morning. I'm sitting there with a police officer looking at me, not allowing, and you can, after a while he was getting exhausted, you can tell. And after a while he realized this is ridiculous, but this is what he has to do. But it was already set the standard of, now I'm pissed. So my grieving turned to, you mean to tell me I can't go and at least cover my mother? I can't sit there with her until y'all come. I can't lay there with her until somebody comes. And I'm just going and going. He's just like,
yeah. Yeah, I remember those hours too. They had to wait for the coroner. They had to wait for the funeral home. And my husband came and we're in the driveway. I couldn't be in the same room space proximity with the police officer. And then another officer came and relieved that officer. And because it was from around that 4:00 upwards to like 11 that morning. I watched the sun come up. Yeah. Sitting out there, having to call my uncle in California and let him know. And it was just,
you're numb.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just with so much that's taken place over the last year. And when we did that work with that initial group, man, we had such a great group of citizens that were trying to do and give hours and hours and hours and hear from the community to make things better. And I think at a point that it felt to others that we were just attacking, that we weren't being the cheerleaders of law enforcement that they wanted us to be. And it was not, that wasn't our role. Our role was not. And, that's why anytime I'm talked to, I have friends that are police officers. I understand how difficult the job is. I totally get it. I am not here to go on any kind of political campaigning of defunding the police or anything about politics or anything like that. Law enforcement needs more training around empathy. They need cultural competency training. They need more mental health support for themselves and as a force. It has to happen. It can't just continue operating like this. And just imagining some of the young people that I worked with, and even in the 90s, people that I knew that passed, just thinking of what their experiences were like. I'm just one person. You're one person, just the two of us in this conversation experiencing. So it's just like, how many more? How many more are they that we are not just solely dealing with the trauma of the death, but dealing with how the situation is then handled when we have to work immediately, just that close contact with law enforcement. And, and then going back to the childhood stuff, and that abuse, family violence laws have changed. Would that same situation happen now? No, they would be all up in the house and CPS would have been called and, all those things. So those things have changed. But it just definitely didn't help the context of me coming into my first interactions as a child, with law enforcement, and then these, additional layers, like you said, of interactions.
And it directly, family life is one layer because that's where we start off. That's your frame of reference, directly shapes who you are until you get out of it. Then you see the world. But your interaction with the police so young was two different things. Yeah. I'm here to help. I didn't help. And then as you're going elementary, then junior high interactions, high school, you've had your story, you had your journey with that. And luckily you came through it. But like you said, how many of us have not come through it? Mm-hmm. And if they ever think about, if anyone realizes how we treat and what we do, how that directly shapes someone's next interaction. Mm-hmm. And people demand from us in service to be empathetic and realize and acknowledge and don't take it personally, or to do all these extra things. But it's like they have another rule that they don't have to do any of that. Yeah. I'm law enforcement. I'm going to enforce the law. And the excuse always is, well, I'm not sure what's going on. Come on. Yeah. Come on. Because if some can do it, all of you can do it. Yeah. And that small few that do it, it's overshadowed. They get overshadowed by the ones who are not doing it. Mm-hmm. And 2020 showed us that. And I really feel, touching on what you said, where the laws have changed because there's so much more exposure. You can't hide behind anything now. Everything that we do is recorded. People are now speaking up. There's no fear of not speaking up because they know I will have 20 cameras now watching what's happening. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say, because you can't hide behind and brush under the rug and treat people any kind of way, because we're going to fight back and we're not going to stop fighting back, no matter how long it takes. So that really makes a big, big difference. Totally big difference.
Yeah. I often think, you said Dr. Marron earlier, and every single time I still hear it, it's just kind of like, what?
That's you.
Oh yeah.
That's you.
That's me. But you think, my path, and my cousin and I just had this conversation, one of the two that lived with me growing up. And, we went through a lot as kids, and witnessed so much and experienced so many different types of abuses. And my life could have totally went a different direction. And when I think of the young people that I've worked with, and I think that's what leads to my, my purpose of serving the community, my purpose of serving young families, some of the most marginalized, underserved, I do feel incredibly passionate about, whether they're low income, whether they're BIPOC. I just feel so passionate about it because I witnessed so many, as a probation officer especially, that were such victims of their circumstances. And a lot of any of their criminal behaviors or drug abuse habits that they picked them up out of some trauma-induced incident. And I'm not here to say that teenagers are drug addicts or criminals because of police officers and an interaction they had with that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying a traumatic event. This is about trauma. And some people deal with trauma by picking up a beer and not addressing it, and they're alcoholics, or pick up any other substance, and that is how they treat their feelings, their trauma, things that they don't feel they have the ability to talk about. Unfortunately, you also have suicides. You also have, so mental health is so incredibly important that we have to do a better job. We just really have to do a better job of helping our community, in addition to helping our law enforcement with it, normalizing the use of therapy. I'm in therapy every Friday at 2:00 right now, and I don't care to just tell anybody and everybody. I tell my employees, I tell my students, I teach on Saturdays, doctoral students, and I tell them, step away, take your mental health break, go for a walk. I am not always the best practitioner of it, especially the physical exercise part of it, but I am trying every day to do better, but I am definitely working on my soul and my brain and healing the trauma, of my life experiences. And I just hope that, you know, through these conversations we continue to have, that things do change, that people do seek help, and that there's a lot of healing that begins to happen.
I want to say thank you so very much for sharing a part of yourself, because I know with healing, the sharing part is difficult when you've gone through that, because we feel like we're alone, and we're really not. There's so many of us who are battling, who've been there, and that maybe talking about it helps. And I know your story, this small snippet, will help someone hopefully execute some change, and hopefully make someone see, maybe an officer see something a little bit different in himself or herself, and realize there needs to be a shift in how can I be that catalyst for change in my department or my city. So thank you, Dr. Marron, so much for sharing your story. I truly appreciate it.